I hope everyone's pretty happy to have us three on the stage. And Fresh to Home, I'll just like you all to raise your hands if you are one of the users of Fresh to Home. How many of you are here? So I believe you have many questions for Mathew and Shan. And let's hope that they get you all the answers that you want. Okay.
As long as it's not for a refund.
As long as it's for a refund. Or to get them fish right now. It's not possible as of now. Okay. So we'll start off with the session. Okay. So the reason I am here is because I want to get out the stories from Mathew and Shan. And let's hope that the stories are something that is good for every other startup. And how a business can scale up from where it started. Okay, so Mathew, you have always been very vocal about going around and sharing your story. There are some people who know the story and some people who may not. So I just want you to shed light on the story of Fresh to Home.
Thank you, Rajeesh. So, you know, what's behind the growth of Fresh to Home? That is our teamwork. Who I am. I'm a fishmonger. You can call me fishmonger, no doubt. Shan, he's 100% a professional. We joined hands in 2015. He's also become a fishmonger, but he is India's #1 fishmonger. But you don't underestimate these fishmongers. Next 2 years, our brand ambassador is Ranveer Singh. So I have 35 years experience in seafood industry. I was joined as a accountant in a seafood exporting company. And after 11 years, I started my own business. First, I supply the raw material to the exporters. Then, around 2000, I started my own seafood export. That was fresh fish export to UAE, Saudi, Singapore, Australia, Taipei. And 2008, the famous recession in the world, that is affected my export also. And in 2012, I started C2Home.com. C2Home.com was India's first online fish market and world first online fresh fish market. And the C2Home was the first company branded the fresh fish. But I know the fish business, but I am not aware about the technology, but I like it. That's why I started. I incorporated that technology to the fish business. Even now, I have no idea what's behind the screen. So 2014, one day one news came in Malayalam Manorama Trivandrum, and so many people is come to my site, around more than 1,000 people. C2Home site was crashed. Then after 2 months, one Mr. Shan Kadavil, he is from Bangalore, he contacted me. He asked me, why you close? He was the customer of C2Home. The reason he is not getting the fresh fish, that's why he is asking. Before that, we have no idea about Shan or Mathew. Then we contacted, and after 2015, we joined and started the Fresh to Home. The rest story will tell Shan, that's better, I think.
So I think maybe I'll give you a little bit of introduction. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. I studied I see a lot of energy here because this is my I haven't spent too much time in Kerala, but I studied in Model Engineering College. So I see a lot of my classmates. I see a lot of my friends, alma mater here. So it's greatly, the energy is quite, conducive. So after my engineering, I was an engineer in the Valley in San Francisco from 99 onwards. So I started in a company called Support.com. I grew up quickly. I became their enterprise CEO by early 2006. I also set up a branch of that in India. Then a public company, so some public company operating experience. Post that, I started a company called Box in the cybersecurity world. And later in 2009, I joined as one of the early CXOs in a company called Zynga, which is, just because the context is all about scaling, Zynga, when we joined, or when I joined, was about 80 or 50 people. And then we became the second largest IPO in the Valley in early 2011, right? It was bigger than most other companies then. I used to make games for a living. I've made games like Farmville, Mafia Wars. I don't know if any of you have played the games I've made, but it was a huge phenomena there at that time. And then back to, at some point, as with most Malayalis, you miss your fish curry and rice, which you really can't get in the US. So I felt the need of coming back to India, primarily for, I say everybody that it's for career and all that stuff, but that's all BS. It's primarily for the good food. And then I came back, I used to buy from Mathew's company, C2Home. The fish was amazing. And at one point, Mathew had to stop and I couldn't get good fish. So that's what united us. Mathew is not the kind of person who you can find on social media. So as he famously says, he is from the market and I'm from the corporate. So basically, I couldn't find him. So I hunted for the website company that has designed C2Home, found them and somehow... Hello? Yeah, can you guys hear me? And that's really how we joined hands. Now, I think a key element, just in the context of scaling businesses, one of the key elements is people, right? And most of you are entrepreneurs. So it's really all about getting complementary skills to allow you to scale. And we are essentially, yin and yang in the sense that he is the expert on all things about the domain. And then I bring in complementary skill set. So one of the biggest learnings, which I think you should all incorporate, is to get people, and especially people as co-founders or founding members, versus as employees, right? Because at the end of the day, a small piece of a big pie is better than a big piece of a small pie, right? So essentially, that's one big learning that Mathew and I have learned through this journey. So we scaled Fresh-to-Home, and fortunately now, Fresh-to-Home is the largest in this category. We do about 2 million orders per month, and we're also in 170 cities right now.
That's very insight information that you've all got, that how Shan and Mathew got together. There's one question I would want to ask you, Shan. Our topic is about technology and scaling. And Mathew's already said that he has nothing to do with technology and e-commerce. That's the reason you came in, and that became a complement way of doing it. The biggest connection for a fish business is the procurement from the fishermen. How did you take the technology to them? Because they are the ones who will actually get you all the products.
So, I think maybe we talked about how complementary skill sets will allow you to scale a company. Now coming back, while I'm a technologist, the person who does the technology is really our co-founder, Jayesh. I'm the CEO overall. But the key thing, if you look at it from a strategic standpoint, right, is when you're in a Series A or a Series B stage, as many of the early stage companies would be, it's really about identifying the product market fit. You know that there is a unique consumer problem, which in our case was getting fish in a chemical-free fashion, right, without any chemicals back to the consumer. You scale that, and Mathew, as a visionary, thought about the vision at C2Home. He was able to scale it to some extent, and then you typically hit a chasm after that, right? This is really the chasm that startups take to scale from there. At that point, you really need to think about not just product market fit or unmet need. You need to think about unfair advantage. What is that one or two or three things that others don't have that you can bring in? If you don't have that, you will end up being a commodity. It's very hard to compete both for consumer mindshare and also for investor mindshare, right? Because there's another important part of scaling. You need to have the capital. And to both of these things, you need to figure out what is uniquely different about you. Now, in our case, what we did is we used technology to our advantage. So Mathew, as a fish exporter, would source from 3 or 4 or 5, 6 harbors, and he did a great job at that, right? Because I was really surprised that he was able to take a commodity like fish, which is incredibly large, and get a 40 or 50% gross margin. Now, if you guys know e-commerce, no companies have got 40 or 50% gross margin. We have that kind of gross margin. The reason we are able to do that, and despite selling at a mass market consumer price, is that Mathew has got the connections, the know-how, and technology to do that. But at the same time, that is not scalable behind 5 or 6 harbors where he would wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning, call all these people up, find out what is the price of Mathi in this harbor, what is the price of that in this harbor, and then do that stuff. So when we saw it, and me and my rest of my co-founders, we shadowed Mathew for almost a year. We figured out that some of this can be automated. Some of them we can use that. So that led to a patent that we currently own called as the Commodities Exchange. So similar to sort of how real commodities are traded, we allowed these fishermen, these tarragons in various different harbors to actually trade with us using a platform, an auctions platform. That allowed us to scale what Mathew was doing to 5 or 6 harbors back to 3,000 harbors across, 3,000 fishermen across 300 harbors. Now, technology is just one side of it. നമ്മുടെ നാട്ടിൽ ഏതെങ്കിലും കടപ്പുറത്ത് പോയിട്ട് ടെക്നോളജി എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ് ഒരു മുക്കുവൻ്റെ അടുത്ത് പോയി കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഒന്നെങ്കിൽ അടിയുള്ളൂ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അവിടുന്ന് ശരിക്കും വരാൻ പറ്റില്ല. അപ്പോൾ അതുകൊണ്ട് ടെക്നോളജിയും അതിൻ്റെ കൂടെ തന്നെ മാത്യുവിനെ പോലെ ഒരാളും വേണം. എന്നാൽ മാത്രമേ നമുക്ക് നമ്മളുടെ ഈ ഡൊമെയിൻ ശരിക്കും മനസ്സിലാക്കിയിട്ട് അതിനെ എങ്ങനെ സ്കെയിൽ ചെയ്യുക എന്നുള്ളതാണ് അതിൻ്റെ ഒരു നെക്സ്റ്റ് സ്റ്റെപ്പ്. സോ ദാറ്റ്സ് റിയലി വാട്ട് വി ഡിഡ് ടുഗദർ. Mathew, anything to add?
So I am very thankful to my CTO Jayesh and other teams, because before that I was slept only 3 hours in a day, because our big harbors started early morning 4 o'clock. After the second level harbors is starting from 8 to 12. After that I have the packing and all things. Then evening in the Thuthukudi, that type of harbor is running in night 10 to 12. So between 1 and 3, that's only, that not in 1 or 2 years, the last 10 or 15 years. So I am very thankful to Shan and team for giving me the sleep. And now I am sleeping 8 hours because of technology.
More than sleep is one aspect to it, but from a investor vantage point or from an unfair advantage point, what looks like a discount to our competitors is us with a healthy margin. And what that means is that beyond a e-grocery play in fish and meat, it is also a very interesting profit-making sort of avenue, and especially in today's landscape, and given the sort of funding winter that we are going through, it's very important to have really solid unit economics. And to get that, you need an unfair advantage. So my advice to all of you guys is to find what is that unfair advantage. Because most of the time when we look at startups, we look at finding what is the unmet need, right? What's the sort of product market fit. Now, especially in today's climate, you have to go beyond that. You have to find out that 1 or 2 things that you can do that others can't do, and create a moat or a barrier using technology.
I think that's a question I think most of the entrepreneurs that are sitting here who are just into getting into a startup, and when it comes to scaling, the most important aspect apart from the people and the technology is also the funds. How you can get more money into the business and how you can approach people to do that. So FreshToHome's seen that evolution from being a startup to now where it is. What would be the suggestion that you would give to these young entrepreneurs who are actually trying to scale up their business right now?
So with due apologies to any investors who's in the group here, fundraising is an art, it's not science, right? Valuations is an art, it's not science. And it oscillates between time to time, right? So especially in today's age and time, one of the couple of things that I typically look at, both from entrepreneur's lens and from an investor's lens, is that try to go after a large market, right? When you try to go to pitch to an investor, don't try to go with blockchain, with AI, in crypto, in that stuff, right? You're then reducing your sort of total addressable market quite significantly. It is good, you have to pepper in and throw AI and blockchain and everything else anywhere you can find it, and that's great. But try to go after a big problem, right? So for example, what we are trying to solve the problem, it is really about fisheries industry, which is about 1% of India's GDP. So trying to, if you start with a area that intrinsically the market size is small, it's very hard to differentiate. Secondly, like we talked about, first identify your product market fit and your unmet need. Thirdly, find what is your key advantage. And after that, especially today, try not to be swayed by the herd mentality. Herd mentality is essential, and especially as in investors, you have to play to the core, right? So the theme last year was really about blitz scaling. Everybody wanted to scale, everybody wanted to grow at 10x, but at the expense of bottom line. And just given where the markets have corrected today, the key advice I'd give to all entrepreneurs here is look at your cash runway. Everything else is a virtual number. Your valuations are things that will go up and down, but remember that with any sort of VC-funded company, it will have anti-dilutions and liquidation preference, so the number doesn't really mean anything, so long as you're either able to generate real cash or to get an exit to your investors. And you're very fortunate if you're in the seed stage or the early stage, because there's a huge appetite for that. If you look at global markets, India's growth right now is a real growth story, right? Among all the doom and gloom globally, where you see VCs that put their pen down in the US market or in Europe, India is this rare beacon of hope, right? We are still growing. Our Sensex is the highest that has hit. You will see a lot of stories of how Zomato or Paytm all have gone down. But remember, Zomato is still trading at what, 6x or 7x of revenue, right? We are not talking about the 1x or 0.5x that you're seeing in the global market. So India is still a very viable, extremely vibrant marketplace. Just do the right thing and get your basics right. Make sure your unit economics are really speaks for themselves, and you don't really need to pitch it beyond that. Try and figure out how to get to a large market opportunity versus focusing on a niche area, and then figure out your unfair advantage. If you figure out your unfair advantage, pretty much everything else will follow on its own.
Mathew, for most people who are doing a startup or are into a business, they always learn from a certain blockade or some problems that they would have found in their business, and they try to get out of it. And I believe Fresh2Home would also have had something similar. Would have had a scenario where you found one idea to be very good in your meetings and discussions, but actually didn't work. Was there some kind of an example that you can share with them?
Yeah, we are facing so many problems that everyone is facing, but we are facing mainly two things. One is demonetization. Second is COVID. So I think demonetization we are facing and we are doing something. So I think, Shan, can you explain that things?
So I think
it's a very interesting story.
We are basically, all of you will face a lot of issues, right? For all the success stories that you see, there will always be moments when you will think that you're on a cliff. You will only have 3 months runway. These are very, very common problems, not just to large, growth stage companies, early stage companies. It's really a phenomena across. We face the same thing at the demonetization time. This was really in the early days when we had just finished we were about to finish our Series A, and we had just had the new investor come in, and we had to show growth, right? We were in the very, very early stage. And at that point of time, suddenly demonetization came. There was no way to pay anybody. There was no money. The entire e-commerce industry, and especially us, got completely tied up. So at that point, we thought, why don't we turn this into an opportunity? We are anyway not going to get money, and so why don't we just think through some great ideas? So we brainstormed on it, and one of the key things that we came up with is this concept called as IOU, right? We said, we don't want your money, we will deliver anyway, and we will give you an IOU slip. In Malayalam, Innu Rokkam Nala Kadam. So basically, in that, there were two things that happened. One, and especially in Bangalore, where and other markets where we were, getting to be larger, it built a brand for us, right? It basically built the company to be, the trust became the cornerstone of how to build Fresh2Home. And it became what the consumers thought about us. So that was the early days in 2016. It grew really, really, really rapidly post that. And interestingly enough, when you, and this is something that I've learned over a period of time, consumers, if you deliver a good experience, consumers will be equally honest with you, right? And that's what we've seen through it. Our breakage ratios, or people who didn't pay us in the IOU, was very little. Might be like in, maybe 1,000, 2,000 rupees or 5,000 kind of range. Pretty much everybody discharged their obligations, and we were able to build a brand based on leveraging a problem to an opportunity.
Apologies for interrupting, sir, but since we are in the last 5 minutes, I think we can open up for questions.
Yeah.
Definitely, there's a lot of excitement in the audience as well.
Right.
So, can we please have the first question?
So we will just, can I ask one question? Yeah, okay. So for all the budding people here, Mathew, what would be your suggestion to start a business? And if they are into the business, what are a couple of things that you will always give them as an advice?
Only one thing, if you like to start a startup or business, you want to start only your passion. You don't go for any backside of anyone. You go for backside of your mind. You want to start your passion. In nowadays the world, what is your passion? That we can convert as a business. Have a chance. Because that much of technology in our world now. If your passion for a kabaddi playing, that also have a chance. If you have drawing, if you have dance, anything. What is your passion? You have a chance. So you want to go with your passion, not for other persons or anyone is showing that. You go with your passion. Survive. We can. Because that much of things, the Indian market is that much of big. All big companies in the world is spending their marketing more than 50% to conquer the Indian market. So now we are living in that market. So anyone have a chance. Don't worry about it.
Thank you, Mathew. Thank you, Shan, for a very important session. And I think most people would be happy that we brought them here and they could share the story. Now the platform's open for people to ask questions. Please introduce yourself and just mention to whom the question is, to Shan or to Mathew.
Yeah, the question is actually open to both of them, right? There was this really interesting point that generating real cash is the main thing, okay, that Shan sir said. And you also said, make sure that your unit economics speaks for you. Like, my question is, how do you look for alternative streams of income rather than the obvious? Right now, FreshToHome is a B2C, right? Like you said that something in the options trading through fish, something like that, that you're doing it, right? How did you land on that? Okay, this is actually something that we can do to, reduce our, me medikinte paisa korkam, namukadu vikam.
So, Mathew, so basically what I was saying is that from day one, you have to figure out how to get that extra edge. In our case, we were selling B2C to consumers. And if you typically do a B2C business, typically it has a 15-16% gross margin, right? That's typically how an e-commerce company operates. At 16% gross margin on a 400-500 rupees net average order value, you won't make money. You're talking about basically you will have 60 rupees or 70 rupees per order. Your cost of delivery is going to be 40-50 rupees. So there's no money there. So what I was saying is that whenever you do a business, now it's not e-commerce is the example I gave you, but it could be in anything else. Just make sure that you first go back to the fundamentals. So in our scenario, we said that we have to first increase our order values. So in our scenario, fish is a high order value item, right? Or meat is a high order value. So typically we operate at 700 to 800 rupees average order value. We have 40% gross margin. So which means that at 800 rupees, you're really talking about 200 to 250 rupees of gross profit. That then pays for all the stuff. So all I was saying is just go back to the basics. Think through why. Don't go with the newness of the idea. Go with the fact that once you start and get the product market fit, look about how to actually increase it. And whatever anybody tells you, you focus on making that one part successful. That was all I was trying to say.
Okay, take another question. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, hi, Shan and Mathew. Great learnings. I'm Ajit Moopan. Questions are to either of you. Could you share some insights of your funding journey?
So, I had a slightly different background. because I had done 2 startups in the Valley before, right? So I have 2 exits, so I had some pedigree. So essentially, it was not very difficult in the beginning. So what I pulled in, we bootstrapped in our early days because we wanted to avoid the initial dilution. So we didn't go too early for fundraising. So we started going to the market when we were about $2 million in revenue or something in that range. And at that point of time, I pulled in from some of my early colleagues in the Valley, people like Peter Thiel or Mark Pincus, or the Facebook CFO or the CEO of Google Ventures and so on. So they did our first angel. And we then created a little bit of a market need from the investor community to do that. We then raised our Series A, which is around early 2016-17. And it was about $32 million of Series A. And it was done by some of the institutional investors, folks that you would be aware. And over a small period of time, we only did as and when needed. And after we demonstrated operating margin profitability. And then we went on, and after our commodities exchange was there, we did our Series B and Series C. Overall, we've raised about, close to about $200 million in, funding. And from some of the most reputed investors, people like the US government. The US government is directly on our cap table and on our board. We've got the angel funds or early stage funds like Iron Pillar, InvestCorp, private equity players like InvestCorp, Ascent Capital. We've got the folks like the Dubai government, the ICD, the Abu Dhabi government, ADQ, and folks like that are on the cap table.
Okay, I will not be able to take any more questions, but Mathew and Shan are available for you to speak to them personally on a mentorship thing. So you can always speak to them in the afternoon. So
Rajeesh, I have one question to Shan. Not for me, that all of you. Shan, can you explain what is the current scenario in the VC circle funding now in the world?
So I think it's an interesting question. I heard that at multiple flavors. And this is where I think it's important to have a forum of this sort. And also beyond this, to have networking, right? Because one of the things that we are naturally blessed with in Bangalore is that this ecosystem started some 20 years back. So we have folks that either lean on each other and then figure this out. So Mathew, that was a leading question. So I think basically we are seeing that there is a huge shift towards being profitable, right? And it is not no surprise because at the end of the day, that's why businesses exist. But people had forgotten this whole basic math in the last 2-3 years. Now, I've been in the Valley from 99. I first saw this in the early 99 when there was a crash and then there was a correction. Of course, in 2007, we've seen that again because, and to be fair, in 2007, after the housing market crash, my then founder, Mark, told me that there's a lot of jobless people around. We should try and figure out how to do something. And gaming was one of the themes. I'm being slightly vicious, but I'm just only being just slightly vicious. So, but at the same time, I'm only telling that to illustrate that regardless of what the funding situation is, a business, if it is viable, is viable whether it's in a bad time or good time. So, but just try to stay away from businesses that are fancier and which are expected to run purely on a investor burn. Now, to be fair, e-commerce itself requires that in the early stages, and it requires a particular level of minimum volumes before you can make it profitable. So that's really where it is. Now, but at the same time, as entrepreneurs, one of the things to understand is that when you have really a challenge, and especially a challenge like the funding situation today, that is the real opportunity. In those kind of times, companies that are from a day one, profitable or are doing things in a much more profitable sense will get prioritized. SaaS, looking at solid ideas that you would see, those will all get prioritized, right? I mean, Zerodha has been built with zero external capital. So essentially, it is really about you guys to figure out what would work in a particular time zone. And as long as you stick to the basics, it is really an amazing time. And to be fair, all of this doom and gloom is only in the current markets, only post early stage, right? We're talking either the seed or the early stage. It's still the same, right? Because the investors have got a longer time to write off their risk, reward horizon. We are more talking about at the growth or the late stage at this point.
thank you.